Have you ever heard your best friend and his wife laughing about how they're going to throw you out on the street without a cent, just as soon as you finish writing a $200 million code for them? That was my Tuesday night. I stood behind a velvet curtain at the 30th anniversary gala of Logitech Solutions, holding a vintage bottle of scotch I'd bought to celebrate our success. My best friend Mark was leaning against a marble pillar, swirling a glass of expensive cognac, surrounded by high-profile investors. His wife, Sarah, the woman I treated like a sister for decades, was clinging to his arm, her eyes glittering with a greed I had been too blind to see until that very second. Mark leaned in, his voice dripping with a condescending arrogance that made my blood run cold. "Don't worry about Arthur," he chuckled, referring to me. "He's a relic. An uneducated driver I keep around out of pure charity. He thinks we're partners, but in reality, he's just my garage boss who happens to be good with old logic boards. Once the sale to the Global Group goes through on Friday, I'm firing him for technical incompetence. He won't get a dime of the $200 million. He's served his purpose, and honestly, his country accent is starting to embarrass me in front of people like you." Sarah let out a sharp, melodic laugh that felt like a serrated blade across my chest. "He really is like a loyal dog," she added. "You just have to pat his head and tell him he's a good boy while you look for a newer model." Before we dive deeper into how I turned their celebration into a digital graveyard, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I share stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss the moment the loyal dog finally bites back. I stood there, paralyzed, the heavy bottle of scotch feeling like a lead weight in my hand. For 30 years, I had been the ghost in the machine, while Mark played the charismatic CEO in tailored suits. I sat in a grease-stained office in the back of the warehouse, writing the proprietary algorithms that made our shipping empire possible. I lived in flannel shirts and drove an old pickup truck because I didn't care about the spotlight. I cared about the work and the brotherhood I thought we shared. I had saved Mark from bankruptcy in 1998 by mortgaging my own home. I had stayed up for 72 hours straight during the 2008 crash to keep our servers running. And now I was just a relic to be discarded. The room felt like it was spinning. They didn't just want to fire me, they wanted to erase me. They had spent years subtly removing my name from patents and restructuring the corporate bylaws while I was busy coding. They thought I was too simple to notice. Mark looked at his watch, the gold reflecting the chandelier light. And I realized he wasn't just my friend. He was a predator who had been fattening me up for the slaughter. But Mark made one fatal mistake. He forgot that while he owned the building, I owned the soul of the company. I didn't say a word. I turned around, walked out the back exit, and drove my old truck into the night, my mind already spinning with a cold, calculated fury. The drive home was a blur of neon lights and rainy windshields. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the kind of adrenaline that only comes when your entire world is revealed to be a lie. I walked into my small, quiet house, a house I had barely spent time in because I was always at the office, making Mark look like a genius. I went straight to my basement office, a room filled with old monitors, half-disassembled hardware, and thousands of lines of handwritten notes. I pulled out a dusty blue folder from the bottom of a locked cabinet. It contained the original partnership agreement we signed at a kitchen table in 1994. Back then, we shared a cheap pizza and dreamt of changing the world. I looked at the signatures. Mine was bold and confident. Mark's was already starting to look like a corporate logo. As I flipped through the pages, I saw the clever ways he had slowly diluted my shares over the years. Every time he asked me to sign a paper while I was busy fixing a server crash, he was actually stealing a piece of my future. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. It wasn't just a business betrayal. It was a total erasure of my existence. I sat there in the dark, the blue light of my monitor reflecting off my glasses. I thought about the holidays I missed, the vacations I never took, and the fact that I had no family of my own because this company was my child. And now, Mark and Sarah were planning to sell my child to the highest bidder, while I was left to rot in a garage. I logged into the company's main server. My credentials still worked, for now. I looked at the master schedule for the sale. The global group was sending their legal team on Friday at 10 in the morning to finalize the transfer. $200 million. Mark would be on a yacht in the Mediterranean by Saturday, and I would be filing for unemployment. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to let them have exactly what they thought they owned: a hollow shell. The next morning, the sun felt too bright for a man whose life had just been dismantled. I walked into the office at my usual time, 6 in the morning. I wanted to see them. I wanted to look into their eyes and see if there was a single shred of guilt left in their souls. I didn't have to wait long. Sarah strolled into the break room around 9, wearing an outfit that probably cost more than my truck. She was humming a tune, looking radiant, the perfect wife of a soon-to-be multimillionaire. She saw me pouring a cup of coffee and flashed a smile that used to feel warm, but now looked like the grin of a shark. "Arthur, darling, you look exhausted," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "You really should consider taking a long break after this week. Maybe find a nice little cottage in the country where you can tinker with your little gadgets in peace. Mark and I were just saying how much you deserve a rest from all this corporate stress." I looked at her, my face a mask of practiced indifference. "I appreciate the concern, Sarah," I replied. "I'm just making sure everything is ready for the big day on Friday. I wouldn't want any technical glitches to get in the way of Mark's big moment." She patted my shoulder, her hand lingering for a second too long, a gesture of pity that made my skin crawl. "You've always been so reliable," she said, "like a clock that never stops." I watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She didn't even see me as a human being anymore. I was just a utility, a piece of office furniture that had finally outlived its usefulness. Later that afternoon, I saw them through the glass walls of Mark's office. They were clinking glasses of champagne, laughing as they looked at a brochure for private islands. They were already spending the money I had earned for them. I went back to my desk in the garage area and opened a hidden partition on my hard drive. My eyes burned as I scrolled through the logs. They had been redirecting small percentages of the maintenance budget into a private offshore account for months. They weren't just pushing me out. They were stripping the company's bones before the sale. They thought they were the smartest people in the room. They had no idea that I had built the room, the walls, and the very floor they were standing on. I decided it was time to verify my suspicions with cold, hard facts. While Mark and Sarah were out at an expensive lunch, I used my master key to enter Mark's executive suite. The room smelled of expensive leather and betrayal. I didn't head for his computer. I knew he kept his most sensitive physical documents in a hidden floor safe behind his mahogany desk. He had forgotten that I was the one who oversaw the office renovation and watched the technicians install it. My fingers trembled as I turned the dial. The heavy door clicked open, revealing a stack of folders bound in black leather. I pulled out a document titled Project Exit. As I scanned the pages, my heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't just a simple termination. They had prepared a narrative to destroy my reputation. They had drafted statements claiming I had been suffering from cognitive decline and that I had made several critical errors that nearly cost the company its license. They were going to fire me for cause, which meant my remaining stocks would be voided, and I wouldn't even get a basic severance package. The cruelty was breathtaking. They didn't just want the money, they wanted to make sure I could never work in this industry again. I found a printed email from Sarah to their lawyer. She wrote that they needed to make sure Arthur was completely neutralized, so he couldn't claim any credit for the software during the global group audit. She called me a useful idiot who had finally run out of use. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly replaced the folders, locking the safe just seconds before the door handle turned. Mark walked in, looking flushed and happy. He didn't even look surprised to see me.
"Oh, Arthur, just the man I wanted to see," he said, flashing that fake $1 million smile. "I've got some papers for you to sign later today. Just some routine stuff for the transition. It'll make things much easier for your retirement transition." I looked at his outstretched hand and felt a wave of nausea. I realized then that I wasn't dealing with a friend who had lost his way. I was dealing with a monster. I nodded slowly, forced a smile, and told him I'd be ready whenever he was. The trap was set, but Mark didn't realize that by trying to bury me, he had given me the perfect place to hide my counterstrike. Sitting in my dimly lit garage office, I stared at a framed photo on my desk. It was from 1998. Mark and I were standing in front of our first delivery van, both of us covered in grease and sweat, grinning like idiots. I remembered that night clearly. Mark was in tears because a major creditor was threatening to seize everything. I didn't hesitate. I went to the bank, took out a second mortgage on my family home, and handed him the check. I told him we were a team and that brothers don't let each other sink. He had hugged me and promised that as long as he had a roof over his head, I would too. The memory felt like ash in my mouth. I had sacrificed my youth and my financial security to build a foundation for his ego. While I was pulling 20-hour shifts to fix the routing software during the 2008 economic crash, Mark was out networking at golf clubs, slowly building the wall of lies that now separated us. He hadn't built this empire with brilliance. He had built it with my labor and his own deceit. Every time I had asked for a formal update on our partnership shares over the last decade, he had waved it away, telling me to focus on the tech while he handled the boring paperwork. The sadness I felt began to crystallize into a cold, hard diamond of fury. I realized that my loyalty had been my greatest weakness, and Mark had used it against me like a weapon. He thought my silence and my simple lifestyle meant I was stupid. He thought because I didn't care about designer watches or expensive cars, I didn't understand the value of what I had created. He was wrong. I opened my laptop and looked at the core heartbeat of the company. It was a sophisticated piece of code I called the Pulse. It managed every truck, every shipment, and every delivery window in real time across 40 states. Mark didn't know that the Pulse required a manual security handshake every 30 days to prevent the system from locking itself down. I was the only one who knew the sequence. I was the only one who kept the heart beating. I looked at the countdown. The next handshake was due on Friday morning, exactly 10 minutes after the scheduled signing of the sale. I closed my eyes and realized I didn't have to break anything. I just had to stop holding it together. Thursday afternoon was my last official day. Mark called me into the conference room. He didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. He was staring at his tablet, swiping through images of luxury villas. Sarah was there too, sitting in a chair like she already owned the building. Mark pushed a thin stack of papers across the polished oak table. "Arthur," he began, his voice flat and rehearsed, "we're moving in a new direction. The global group wants a younger, more agile tech team. We've decided to let you go, effective immediately. Because of some recent performance issues we've documented, we can't offer a full severance, but I've authorized a $10,000 parting gift. Just sign here to waive any future claims against the company." I looked at the paper. $10,000 for 30 years of my life. It was an insult designed to make me feel small. I looked at Sarah. She was checking her manicure, completely bored by the destruction of my career. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I picked up the pen and signed my name with a steady hand. "I understand, Mark," I said quietly. "I'll pack my things from the garage and be out by 5. Mark finally looked up, a flash of relief crossing his face. He actually looked happy that I was being so easy about it. "Glad you're being a professional about this, Artie. You always were a team player." I walked back to my workspace for the last time. I didn't pack much, just a few personal tools and a picture of my late parents. But before I left, I sat down at my terminal. I didn't plant a virus. I didn't delete files. That would be illegal. Instead, I simply unlinked my personal encrypted key from the auto-renewal server. The system was like a massive dam, and I was the only person who knew how to turn the valve to release the pressure. By signing those papers, Mark had legally stripped me of my access and my responsibility to maintain that valve. I was no longer the guardian of the pulse. I was just an uneducated driver on his way home. I walked out of the building, the security guard giving me a sympathetic nod. I climbed into my old truck, turned the ignition, and felt a strange sense of peace. The clock was ticking, and for the first time in 3 decades, it wasn't my problem. Friday morning arrived with a heavy, suffocating heat. I sat on my porch with a simple cup of black coffee, watching the birds while my phone sat silent on the wooden table. I knew exactly what was happening 10 miles away. At the headquarters, the lobby would be filled with catering staff, expensive floral arrangements, and men in 3-piece suits. Mark and Sarah would be at the center of it all, preening like royalty before the representatives of the global group. My mind drifted to the internal servers. In the digital world, time moves differently. At exactly 9:45, the system would attempt its routine handshake. It would look for my unique, hand-coded authorization to bridge the gap between the logistics database and the fleet GPS. Without that bridge, the two sides of the company would stop talking to each other. It was like a brain losing its ability to tell the heart to beat. Around 10 o'clock, my phone finally buzzed. It was a text from an old friend who still worked in the warehouse. He told me the atmosphere was electric. Mark had just given a speech about innovation and vision. He had mentioned how he built this company from a single van with nothing but his own grit. Not a single mention of the man who was currently sitting in a rocking chair in flannel shirts. I looked at the clock. 10:05. The lawyers would be opening their briefcases right now. The pens would be poised over the signature lines of the $200 million contract. Mark was likely leaning back, thinking about the private jet he wanted to buy. He was so convinced of his own brilliance that he never stopped to ask how the engine actually worked. He had spent so much time making sure I was out of the legal picture that he forgot I was the only one holding the technical picture together. Suddenly, my phone began to vibrate violently. It was Mark. I didn't answer. A minute later, Sarah called. I let it go to voicemail. Then came a flurry of texts from the office manager. "Everything is freezing. The trucks are stopping. The GPS is dark. Arthur, pick up." I took a slow sip of my coffee. The silence of my backyard was a sharp contrast to the digital firestorm I knew was consuming their dreams. The sale wasn't just in jeopardy. The very foundation of their lies was beginning to crumble. By 10:15, my phone was practically glowing from the heat of incoming calls.
I finally picked up.
I didn't say a word, just listened to the chaotic background noise of the boardroom. I could hear Mark screaming at a technician in the distance. Then, his voice came through the speaker, high-pitched and frantic, stripped of all its usual corporate polish. "Arthur, thank God you picked up," he gasped. "Something is wrong. The whole network just went into a hard lockout. Every truck in the fleet has pulled over because their tablets are showing a critical security failure. The guys from the global group are sitting right here, and they're looking at their watches. Get down here right now and fix this." I leaned back in my chair, listening to the wind in the trees. "I'm sorry, Mark," I said calmly, "but I'm no longer an employee. I signed the papers yesterday, remember? Technical incompetence. You said I was a relic who didn't know how to use a smartphone. I'm just following your lead and staying out of the way so the experts can handle it." "Arthur, stop playing games," Mark hissed. "I'll pay you for the day. Just give us the bypass code. We have $200 million on the line. If this contract doesn't get signed in the next 30 minutes, they're walking away." Sarah's voice chirped in the background, desperate and shrill, pleading with him to tell me they'd double my $10,000 gift. I almost laughed. They still didn't get it. They thought everything had a price tag, including my dignity. I told Mark that I didn't have a bypass code to give him. The system didn't break. It simply timed out because the authorized administrator, the one they legally removed, wasn't there to verify the security integrity. I hung up and turned on the local news stream on my laptop. A reporter was already standing outside our headquarters. Apparently, hundreds of our delivery trucks were blocking major intersections across the city because their automated braking systems had engaged during the lockout. It was a total collapse. Mark had spent 30 years trying to steal the glory, and now, in 30 minutes, the whole world was watching him fail. The phone rang again. This time, I hit the speakerphone button. I could hear the echoes of the grand conference room, the muffled whispers of horrified investors, and the shaky breathing of a man who realized his throne was made of cardboard. Mark was no longer demanding. He was begging. "Arthur, please," he whispered. "The lead investor from Global Group just stood up. They are calling the whole deal off. They think our technology is a fraud. You have to tell them it is just a glitch. I will give you anything. 5% of the sale. 10%. Just tell them what to do." I looked at the original partnership agreement on my desk, the one where he had crossed out my name in spirit long ago. "Mark," I said, my voice steady and cold, "do you remember Tuesday night, behind the velvet curtain? I heard you call me a loyal dog. I heard Sarah say I was an embarrassment. You told those people I was just an uneducated driver you kept around out of pity. Well, the driver has left the vehicle, and he took the ignition keys with him." There was a long, dead silence on the other end. I could practically feel the blood draining from his face. Then, the voice of the Global Group CEO boomed in the background. "Is this the man who actually wrote the source code?" Mark didn't answer. I spoke up instead. "Yes, I wrote every line of the software you are trying to buy. But Mark fired me yesterday for technical incompetence. According to the papers he made me sign, I am legally barred from touching that system. If I help you now, I would be violating the very contract Mark drafted to ruin me." The CEO asked if the system could be fixed without me. I told him the truth. Not without a complete rebuild that would take months and cost millions. I heard the sound of a briefcase snapping shut. "We are done here," the CEO said. "Mark, expect a massive lawsuit for misrepresenting the stability of your assets." Sarah started screaming, calling me a traitor, but I just smiled. The screen on my laptop showed the company's stock price plunging into the dirt. Mark had tried to sell a masterpiece while calling the artist a janitor. Now, he was left with a pile of useless hardware and a mountain of legal debt. I hung up the phone, walked out to my garden, and breathed in the fresh air. The empire had fallen, and for the first time in 30 years, I was a free man. In the months that followed, the dust finally settled on the ruins of Mark's career. Without the sale and facing massive lawsuits from investors for misrepresentation, the company filed for bankruptcy. Mark and Sarah had to sell their mansion, their cars, and even that expensive private island brochure was likely used to light a fire in whatever small apartment they ended up in. They tried to sue me for sabotage, but my lawyers had a field day, showing the court the papers Mark had forced me to sign. You can't fire a man for being incompetent and then sue him for not being a genius when you need him. As for me, I didn't stay in that garage. The Global Group reached out to me directly 2 weeks after the collapse. They didn't want the company. They wanted the mind that built the logic. I negotiated a contract that recognized me as the sole owner of the new, updated version of the software. I'm now a consultant, working 4 hours a week from a beautiful house overlooking the coast. I've started traveling, seeing the world I only used to see on a shipping map. I've traded my old flannel for high-quality linen and my old truck for a reliable SUV that can handle the mountain roads I now call home. I finally have time to develop my own ideas without anyone taking the credit. I feel younger than I did at 40. My health is better, my mind is sharper, and I've made real friends who value me for who I am, not what I can do for their bank accounts. Looking back, I realized that Mark didn't just steal my work, he was stealing my life. By letting his empire crumble, I didn't just get revenge, I got my freedom back. I sometimes wonder if I was too cold, or if I should have warned him one last time. But then I remember the laugh Sarah gave when she called me a loyal dog, and I know I did the right thing. I spent 30 years being a silent partner to a loud-mouthed thief. Now, I'm the one speaking, and the world is finally listening. Do you think I was right to let the system crash during the sale? Or should I have taken the 10% he offered at the last second? What would you have done if you found out your best friend was planning to leave you with nothing? If you enjoyed this story of justice and calculated revenge, make sure to hit the like button and leave a comment with your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another incredible story of people getting exactly what they deserve. The end. Thank you for listening.